iHeartRadio, Black Excellence.
Hello and welcome back to our second episode of our iHeartRadio Black Excellence series. I'm Jamar McNeil and I'm joined by Azalea Hart, Dames Nellas, and Leah Abrams to talk about Black representation in mainstream media. And as mainstream media hosts, I'm sure we all have a lot to say about that. So let's just get right into it. Number one, I think we should start by just letting everybody who may not be familiar with what we do, let them know what we do. Azalea, why don't you start?
Okay, I am a on-air personality with CHUM, and then I do a lot of other freelance stuff around the city, which is amazing. So yeah, and then I guess we'll get into that more a little bit later.
Word. Okay, Leah, go ahead.
I am the morning show producer for Virgin Mornings, and that's it.
Right here in Toronto as well. Dames, let them know what's up. Dames.
Yeah. You know me, radio DJ, host, personality, whatever you want to call it, with Virgin Radio Toronto in the city. And actually, I guess I could say across the country too, because I have a show that airs from coast to coast on the weekend. So we're busy over here. Yeah, we're definitely busy, but it's taking some time to get to where we're at. When you say mainstream media, I think what you're referring to is like format, which we'll dive into, because sometimes not everybody who's outside of the business knows what we mean when we say mainstream media. And I think the keywords mainstream media are a hot topic right now, So
you make some good points there, Dames. Good points.
Yeah. So what I mean is like, representation within mainstream media, from my point of view, it's like, we do top 40 radio on Virgin, right? So essentially it's going to be, in an ideal world, something for everybody who's tuned into that station. You could play a Taylor Swift record, you could play a Drake record, you could play a Avicii record, and as opposed to like something that may be a little bit less mainstream, which I think is just really derivative from the term advertising, right? Like when we're really talking about it, like mainstream is like, how are we going to get the most eyes on this particular product or service in order to capitalize on advertising dollars, right? So that is something I think that, it's important to kind of define right off the top of the conversation, because we're looking at stuff, we're all in mainstream media. I work for Virgin, Leah works for Virgin, both you and Azalea work for CHUM, which is mainstream media, for Bell Media, for iHeartRadio. It's all kind of mainstream stuff. But like I said, that phrasing mainstream media, especially now in 2022, is like super hot, one way or the other. A lot of it has to do with COVID and vaxes and all that kind of stuff. But as a member of media, sometimes I feel attacked when they start coming at mainstream media, So I have to let everybody know that is not all of us.
It's funny that you said that, Dames, because I didn't even think of it that way, because the word mainstream media, when you're in the performance, industry part of it, like getting to the mainstream media is an achievement. It's like, because for us, mainstream means the amount of impressions you can make, the amount of people, the mainstream, the masses are taking in this media. But in the other world, or in the people world, when you say mainstream media, that's like a curse word almost. It's like, oh, you mainstream media. It's like, whoa. It's like, it's almost like a put down. But basically, like Dame said, we're talking about the amount of people that are being impressed upon by the message. That makes it mainstream. The largest amount of people.
Right. So everyone who's in mainstream. For people who are not in mainstream, or just people who are listeners or audience, they see mainstream as the people who have the most influence.
The most influence, the most.
And like you said, impression. So what more people see us. And I think that's why this topic is important, because for representation, we are that representation for the mainstream here in Toronto.
No doubt. And for those who don't know, I'm the morning show host for Toronto's radio station CHUM 1045, which is
he got the big job. He got the big job. The big job. No.
It is a very mainstream platform. Very big.
It is a platform, that's for sure.
No, you know what? Let's piggyback on a topic from the last conversation that we had in terms to continue the conversation in terms of mainstream media. I remember, in the first episode of this installment, we were discussing TLC Waterfalls, right? And it was like the first time you heard it play on your station, it didn't have Left Eye's rap.
Left Eye's rap in it, right?
And that kind of is the mainstream funnel, right? Like that's like the barometer
Right.
in which for decades it's kind of been like, well, this isn't quite mainstream enough. You know, if
Right.
we remove this rap version, then we can, you know, some people don't like rap, some people don't like hip hop, like that kind of conversation, right?
And this is all right. So not to cut you off, but okay, so now we're talking about Black representation in mainstream media and why I believe it is very important to have Blacks represented in mainstream media is so that you can have a voice at those tables. You know, from what I understand, and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but we're just talking about what it is. From what I understand, the decision to remove that version and a lot of other songs that have raps at some point, because, you know, in like the mid 2000s, early 90s, that was the format of a song. You make a song, the singer sings, da-da-da, and at like verse 3, the rap comes in, and then you come back to the chorus, right?
J-Lo and the Locks, you know, J-Lo and Ja Rule,
Montel
like,
Jordan, like everybody. That was the format.
J-Lo was all in the mix. But she from the Bronx, so it's good.
Of course. But at some point in mainstream radio, a decision was made that we need to remove the rap, the spoken word part of these songs, so that either, you know, you hear people say we don't want to scare off the audience, and let's just be real, we're talking about the white audience, or we're told that, you know, we got to take this rap so we make it a little less noisy or abrasive or whatever. And these are all, you know, for people of the culture, these are hard things to hear, because I mean, for me, and like we said, and if we're going back to the first episode of this podcast, Black culture, and if we're talking about hip hop culture, for some people it's just a product. For some people it's just a song. For some people it's just, you know, this is just something to get more ears on a radio station. But for me, this is literally my culture. Right. It's literally, like, it's not even figuratively, like, what is my culture? It's it's Black culture. It's hip hop, it's reggae. This is my culture. So when you taking my culture and you nitpicking it and picking it apart and taking pieces and switching it out, that is disrespectful.
Totally. I agree with that. And, you know, it's not something that's happened overnight. We're talking about, you know, we were talking about the age of hip hop and can we still consider it a new art form? And since day one, it's been, you know, the coolest music on the planet, and it kind of infiltrated mainstream media in a very indirect way. But when you're discussing it now in 2022, in the era of the woke, we have, you know, certain terms like microaggression. And that is a microaggression on behalf of the industry. When you take a record that's been designed and produced a certain way, and then you alter the record to appeal to a more quote unquote mainstream audience, that is a huge and flagrant microaggression. Huge. Right? I'm not putting it on anybody in our business, the media business, because it doesn't start there. That record is recorded and produced somewhere first. And then it is presented as a product in order to gain exposure to radio, to streaming media, to YouTube, whatever you say it is. So I think we're looking at, you know, different silos in terms of music and representation, media being one part of it, of course. But what I actually think, and backing up our first conversation and where this all kind of started, was like, why are they even presenting the option to play the non-rap edit? Like, that shouldn't be an edit on the floor. It should be, this is the record, this is how the record came out, and this is the way it is. Like, Dua Lipa and DaBaby is a different conversation, right? But what you have to realize is this: that record was initially presented as Dua Lipa and DaBaby, and then a separate version for Dua Lipa and DaBaby, or without DaBaby, sorry, for exactly what we're discussing.
Exactly.
Here.
It became part of a formula. Like, hey, you can have a version with the rap, you can have a version without the rap.
So when DaBaby had that incident, and we're not going to get into the incident, but when he had the incident, it was a very easy switch for everybody who was playing that baby. It wasn't like, oh God, we got to go back there and we got to get our producers to edit out the baby parts and da-da-da-da. It was like, okay, well, we'll just swap this one for this one, and then we'll just keep going. And that I think is a big part of the issue when it comes to, you know, representation and mainstream media.
Okay, I agree with you, Dames, on that for sure. But to put it on the flip side, so like we discussed in our first episode, how hip hop is considered, or could still be considered, a new genre, right, to music. a real form of music. So in the beginning, it was probably quite, like you already suggested, abrasive to people to hear this form of music, especially with the introduction of why it was introduced, because you know, it was a way of expressing how we felt in this mainstream world, right? Would you say though that it has progressed a little bit and has, like Dame suggested, infiltrated mainstream culture to the point now where there are mainstream artists now considering hip hop to be included in their songs, where
Absolutely.
20 years ago, perhaps they wouldn't have. For instance, you mentioned Dua Lipa. Another track that comes to mind is Payphone by Maroon 5.
Right.
I know they had Big Sean and they had a separate track without Big Sean, but they also had a track with Big Sean.
Right.
I mean, I think 20 years ago, they probably wouldn't have even regarded Big Sean to place on the song itself.
For sure.
So I would say, yes, for sure, there are issues within deciding, you know, whether hip hop can be considered mainstream in certain areas. But I would say it has progressed to where people feel the need to bring in hip hop culture within, you know, their mainstream art.
But what I will say about that is this: it's the artist reaching out and making those connections, the actual artist. What I think the bigger conversation in regards to mainstream media is the presentation of the product, right? So meaning Maroon 5 does a record with Wiz Khalifa or Big Sean or whoever, because they have a few. They have a few.
Cardi B.
Right.
Megan Thee Stallion.
Their latest. They have a
I mean,
little
you see
trend
the
going.
formula, guys? You see what's
Yeah.
happening? Go ahead. I'll let you finish.
No, but if you're Maroon 5, right, and you're Adam Levine, and you got, you know, Maroon 5 is a big act, a big pop rock, all kind of like they hit a lot of the points, you know, pressure points. And they like the hip hop music, they like the culture, they like the lifestyle. So I think it's more or less they're reaching out to these artists to get the job done, so to speak. Now, when they present it to the label's going like this. The label's going, well, if we want to hit X, Y, and Z format, what we can do is we can take this part off of this and do this and that and this and that. And that truly is where the problem is. And you know, the reality of it is it's marketing and advertising that is the real underlying issue when you're talking about mainstream media, because at the end of the day, guys, we all know it all boils back to the money. No matter what industry you're in, it all boils back to the money. So going back to the initial conversation, I definitely think that hip hop has evolved to a point where there's so much eclectic sounds. Like, you know, there's a drill scene where it, arguably it is very abrasive and not everybody wants to hear that. And then there's, you know, stuff where it's more along the lines of Drake, where it's like, well, hold on a second. Is this really hip hop or is this like a blend of R&B? Is he singing? Is it like, so there's a whole, you know, smorgasbord of hip hop acts. But I think I think sometimes, you know, people have this history and it's just embedded in their brain. Like originally hip hop was depicting real life, right? And it was it was fine when it was LL Cool J and the Beastie Boys, but when it became NWA and Uncle Luke, it became something totally different. And it became something totally different, right? So that it's always going to be a balancing act. But to go back to like mainstream media, it's just a bigger conversation of what the product is. It's everything behind the product that's designed to move the product either one way or the other, you know?
They need Black people in the offices. They need Black people in those roles of, you know, position that position of power that could say, oh, actually, we can keep these in because we can get advertising dollars from, you know, other areas. Or they need, you know, they need more people of color in those positions to say something. You know,
that
what
is
I mean?
1000%.
A lot of the people in the offices are, you know, non-POCs.
Well, you know, the biggest issue with that is, I'm sorry, Leah, but
No. I'll talk after.
The biggest issue, which Azalea points out a very strong point, because if there was not a person, I'm gonna big myself up for a second, if there was not a Black person in the room to say, hey, you're committing a cardinal sin by taking Lisa Dead Left Eye Lopez out of Waterfalls, then it's not going to happen.
Make her middle name Dead.
You know, no,
but do you understand what you do understand what I'm saying? This is part of the representation conversation, because we are talking about representation in media. Yeah. It's important. And I think anybody who's a decision maker, anyone who's a manager, I mean, you should really really strongly consider diversity, because you might have a blind spot in your thinking that you might need somebody from the culture to put a light on for you. Be like, yo, that's,
You know what's the funny part of
It's a
all of this?
positive verse.
Yeah.
it's a great verse. It's a very positive verse.
You know, the funniest part about all of this is this, right? What do you think happens when the person that buys the album or buys the single and listens to the single, or listens to the song or whatever is listening to? They're listening to the original version of the song. It don't matter how many times you cut up the song or remove this piece of the song, remove that piece of the song. If they really like the song, they're gonna find the song and listen to it on their own. Back in the day, they would buy the album, they'd buy the tape, they'd buy whatever, and they listen to it. Like you ever listen to a clean version and a dirty version and be like, wait, what? Like you're like caught off guard. You're like, wait a second, what? This isn't the version I know. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like, if they're able to drum up enough support to where the people enjoy the music and they're gonna go buy their music, they're gonna get familiar with the original version anyway. And that was always my approach when I was working, behind the scenes in program. And it was always like, listen, don't tamper with the music. Don't edit the music. Don't change the music. Don't add an intro time to the music. Don't cut the outro time to them. Don't take nothing unless it was like, abrasive. And there's been a couple times where it's like, all right, yeah, for sure. Okay. But more often than not, when it's just two artists collaborating to make a song for your described demographic, like you have to just play it for what it is, because people are going to find it their own way. And then you start to talk about mainstream media and authenticity, right? Which is a whole nother topic, right? So Leah,
your point, yes. Okay, yes. I don't even know if my point even resonates anymore, but I think it does. Going back to when we were discussing Maroon 5 and the artist being the one to like source out, a hip hop connection or a rap verse for their songs, I wouldn't give them that much credit. The credit I would give it to is more so social media. I think social media, more so than people, in the higher ups, I think that's what's deciding what the culture and what mainstream culture looks like today. It's no longer having, the heavyweights at the top of the building deciding what goes where, what sounds good, and what people are going to like anymore. We, the people, are deciding on social media in real time what or how to move the culture, how to move the needle. The culture is we are seeing many different forms through social media because we can look anything up. We have access to everything. Yeah. And we decide, look at Twitter, look at Black Twitter. That moves the culture in itself, right? Yeah. So to have our voices now being finally heard and amplified, now the conversation is different. Now mainstream looks different because we are being heard. So I would give a lot of credit to social media as to why we are hip hop. When I say we, I mean hip hop. We hip hop are now regarded as mainstream. That's my point.
That's another great point. It just, representation matters because like Leah says, now that we are able to be represented on a grander scale because of social media, you have to listen because the metrics are there. And, just taken from who we are as professionals, we are represented in a building on a platform. And, you have to listen to what we say because we have a seat at the table. So that representation is equally as important. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Jamar, any of you guys, do you guys ever feel like you have to dumb it down just a little bit when you're actually like doing your job?
You know what? Dames. This is the question that everyone who knows us and listens to us on the radio knows is asking. Like, do you guys it's a two-pronged kind of act, if you will. Number one, at the end of the day, you're talking to an audience, and you don't want to be saying a bunch of stuff that's just going over your audience's head. They're like, "What is this person talking about?" Half the time they're speaking, I don't know what language they're talking. I don't know what they're referencing. I don't get these references. So for me personally, I try to do a balancing act where I let people who are from my community know that, I know what's up. Me know Wagwan. You understand? Me know Wagwan. But then you also have to let other people know that, like, I can see you on your level, but you can also get a look at my level and where I come from, and in the way I say things and how I say things. I hopefully try to explain and put a little context for those who may not know. So for me, it's a two-pronged approach, letting people know that, I know what's up, and letting people know like, hey, this is what's up. You might want to check this out.
And I've said this before, sometimes on the morning show, Jamar and I would make jokes that maybe only the Caribbean audience would get. But then, you know, if sometimes I take the approach where it's kind of like, if you don't get the joke, it wasn't meant for you. But the people it was meant for really appreciate
we'll get it. Yeah.
They will get it, but they appreciate it to a whole other level. The fact that we are even here, they're even hearing things that they can connect with on the morning show with Marilyn Dennis and Jamar. You know what I mean? So I think it's so important in that. So sometimes I do feel like I reel it in sometimes and try not to say certain things the way I would say something or react the way I would react normally in everyday life. But when we do it, we'll get like texts on it from other people who are listening from the Caribbean, or I'll get like DMs later on Instagrams, someone saying like, oh my God, I heard you say this. That was so funny. I never laughed so hard before. You know what I mean? But those little tiny moments that we do get like throw in there on mainstream feel really good for both us and the listener.
Yeah, we have that over at Virgin. So sometimes I come on as producer Leah for the Virgin Morning Show. And not only that, I mean, it's only me from the Caribbean in that room, but sometimes you're introducing a whole new world to them. Like, for instance, I was talking about how Jamaican restaurants, sometimes you just take what you can get.
Yo, big facts.
And you go there, gonna have that is like a.
You having a fried dumpling? No, not anymore. You having a rice and peas? Not anymore.
Yeah.
You having a
We're not
plantain?
have that.
Not anymore.
We had it early. We're not have that.
Run out.
And you just have to suffice with what they give you. And also, I was mentioning that like the service might not be so nice and kind, but the food is so delicious and tasty that it's worth going there, and the price is nice too. So that was a whole new experience. They didn't know that, this is what, our Jamaican food restaurants in, Toronto are like, and in Jamaica too, by the way. But like that's opening it up to them, and now they refer to it back and forth. Now they're like, oh, Leah, when you went to that Jamaican food restaurant, how long did you wait? So now you're opening up a whole new world for a whole new audience. So that also helps.
Exactly. Yeah. We've had conversations about whether Trinidad KFC is better than Jamaican KFC.
We had that too.
We had a whole debate about that.
Yeah,
and the beautiful thing about that, Azalea, was when people hear those authentic anecdotes and conversations, they go, wait a second, they get me, they understand me, they know me. They're not just up there just, faking the funk or trying a thing. Like, these people actually are like me. And that's just so important. Once again, going back to the title of this is representation in mainstream media. And sometimes, us as Black folks, we're wondering, do you want representation, or do you just want like a figurehead? Do you want real representation, or do you just want a token? Do you want do you want someone that looks like me, or do you just want me? Because this is me.
I worry about that all the time.
Yes.
Well, this is kind of why I asked you guys that question just now, because I remember very consciously when I started at Flow, right? Flow 93.5, which is the hip hop station. When I started at Flow, it was independent. It wasn't owned by any big media conglomerate. It was literally a gentleman by the name of Denham Jolly. Been back and forth with the CRTC for the better half of a decade to license a Caribbean/Black radio station in the city to play hip hop, R&B, reggae, soca, So that was in 2001. Funny enough, this week is like the 20-year anniversary or 21-year anniversary of Flow being on the air, right? So that's where I started, right? And I started there as an intern, worked my way into a weekend and a mix show DJ. And then I had the opportunity to come over to Virgin, which was a big opportunity, but I was very conscious about what the opportunity was. And I'm not talking about in terms of like, what they see perceptually or whatever. I was aware of what the brand was, what it stood for, and how I would have to change, how I would have to acclimate. Right? Because there wasn't people, there were people on the radio in the city who had Caribbean roots like I did, but there weren't many doing mainstream media. Right. So I remember being very conscious about how I kind of went in initially, and how I was, dressing the way I went in there, and how I was speaking the way I went in there. And I was very, very conscious about how I was approaching the mainstream top 40 CHR station in the city.
And for those who don't know, CHR is contemporary hit radio.
So top 40 radio, right? Like
Right.
you couldn't be on the air talking that yo, here's Taylor Swift, right?
But,
Even though she's got a record
but
with
can you or can't you, James? Like that's.
But this
I
is
want to put a pin in that for a
I
second,
like this,
because
yeah.
I want people who are not Black to understand these are daily conversations that Black folks, people of color, are having with themselves every hour. Like we're always saying, was that too hood for them? Was that a little too Caribbean for them? Did I yard that up a little too much?
Well,
and
this
like,
is the thing for
it's
me.
Stressful. It's stressful. You
for
know what
me,
I'm saying?
like I'm mixed, right? So
Yeah.
I can literally like just kind of play whatever side of the fence. Like when I first started at Virgin, I was like blow drying my hair out. So like it was like really I had to look into the mirror and be like, okay, you know, at some point I was like, look, man, because they started throwing this word authenticity around in the business, right? Like 2016, 2017, it started to all be about authenticity and da 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 da. And at that time, I wasn't on the air. Like I was on the air, but not really. I was doing programming, right? Which I was learning is a totally different beast. That's a marketing and advertising beast. That's the initial part of the conversation. But even when I went into the office, I was dressing completely different. Like I dressed, you know, the way a radio DJ would dress now. But when I was director, I was in there, you know, with the suits, and like people used to compliment me like, yo, why you dress? Like they couldn't believe somebody in radio dressed this way. Wow. You know what I mean? But that was because I was very conscious of what I had to overcome in those boardrooms, right? Because I was the guy in there being like, yo, why aren't we playing Bodak Yellow? I don't understand. I could show you videos of me in the club with 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old people singing every single lyric of this record word for word, like 2,000 people. I would just drop the beat out and just let it go. Like I've had so many uphill battles in regards to records, like Travis Scott and Drake records, believe it or not, like Drake records I've had to like go up the hill with, you know, Cardi B records, like, so, but it is different when you're approaching mainstream media, but I was very conscious of that, which is why I kind of wanted to ask that question, because, you know, Jamar, you're coming from Chicago, right, where you were doing the CHR, the top 40 show there, and you didn't really know what CHUM FM was. You're just like, wow, I think this is a cool opportunity. Toronto's a great city, but then you come into this heritage morning show seat, Roger and Marilyn, and God bless the both of them. They're from very different walks of life. So I wonder if you were like ever looking at yourself in the mirror and be like, do I have to be something I'm not, or am I just
James
myself?
From day one, like I full disclosure, I didn't. And this is no disrespect because I'm just not from this country originally. Like I didn't know anything about anything. I did some, you know, light research, you know, before accepting the position and kind of say, okay, this is different than what I'm used to. You know, for those who don't know, I came from radio stations in the United States, one in Chicago and a couple of different cities that were top 40 CHR. But, you know, I'll tell you, in Canada, the radio landscape is very different than in the United States, because even though, you know, there's a fight for representation of Black people in the United States, the fight is even tougher here in Canada. Like there is major like in certain cities, you'll have like 3, 4, 5 Black radio stations on the air.
Right.
And so it's not really a crazy thing to see authentically Black people on the radio, whereas in Canada, Toronto specifically, it's like 1, maybe 2, or maybe a half, depending on how you. So it's like, I found that when I came here and started working at our radio station, like the reactions we were getting from people when I told them where I worked, or when they saw, you know, the press that I'm the one here, like people were like floored. I'm like, wait a second, what is going on? Like I was surprised. I was like, why are people reacting like this, that I'm here? And I'm realizing that like what was done, the decision that we all made to come together and work together, is something that hasn't really been done here before.
It's groundbreaking. It's groundbreaking. That is the real word. But you know what though? It's the timing of it, which I think was like, it's perfect. You know, we talk about mainstream representation. We've done a lot of it here. We're talking about people in front of the camera and people behind the scenes. I think, you know, obviously it's more impressionable to be the person in front of the camera, in front of the microphone, and that's what people see, right? So while there is importance to that, being behind on the other side of things, to be that voice in the room, to be like, yo, H&M, why did you put that kid in that sweater? Like, yo, y'all shouldn't do that because X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
Very good
Like,
example.
and
That's a great
yeah,
example.
well, you know what the funny
They
part
had nobody in the office that asked that.
Clearly not. Clearly,
you know what the funny part about that was? I was thinking about this the other day. Leah and I were doing a podcast at this time. So this is going back like 3-4 years ago.
2018.
Right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, I haven't purchased anything from H&M since then, partially because I don't really buy clothes the way I used to. But at the same time, it was just like, nah, like
You're making a choice.
like it wasn't even about like the prejudice of it. Was just like literally, y'all, how stupid are you? You know what I mean? Like, how stupid are you? And not to say mistakes don't happen, but certain things should never happen.
But
right?
once again,
like,
Dames, it's about having people in the room who don't have that blind spot. And it's very important, our counterparts of other races and persuasions, man, you don't want to be on the other end of a situation where you're like, I just didn't know. Like, and it's something you probably should have known, but you had no one, you had no one around you to remove the blinders and be like, yo, don't do that. Do this instead. Don't say that. Say this instead. Don't put that out there.
Like what was the one what was it? Bed Bath and Beyond? There was some controversy with them in regards to Black History Month. Leah, I feel like you have the tea on this. Lay it on me.
Just because I laughed at it. It was hilarious. Bath
and Body Works or
Bath
something.
and Body Works was it? They put like Kunta Kinte cloths on on soap. It was ridiculous. You remember that? They put like
Kente cloth on the soap. Yeah. I mean,
they did that this month.
So what we're seeing right there, for instance, and this is just me just kind of looking at it from the outside, right? Because obviously I don't work for Bed Bath and Beyond or whoever, right? But you're looking at people who are,
Sure,
you're clearly men who don't know these brands. But go ahead.
Anything with that is just
but what you're seeing in that particular instance, which is exactly what we're talking about, is somebody is making a decision to be like, hey, we want to be inclusive. We just don't know how. What is the best way to go about this? Because I don't feel like something like that is malicious, but I could be way off. I could be wrong. I could be way wrong.
That's like the memes. They're like, oh, all the, big timers at the office showing up for Black History Month, and they're in,
Kente cloth and the shiggies and the koofies and what.
Right. That's what memes coming from.
Right. But when we talk about this, right, in particular, like we talk about, having that person in the boardroom to be like, okay,
right,
this is how we should go about this. You know what I mean? Like even with us and ourselves, like what we're doing as a brand in terms of, representing for Black History Month. Traditionally, Virgin Radio is a mainstream radio station, and we've been discussing this, right? So we're trying to, for lack of a better term, just kind of be all inclusive to everybody, right? But having Leah head the charge up is the best course of action there, because it's like it's something that she walks and lives with every single day of her life, and she's a representative on the morning show, which garners the most attention on the station. So that is an example of when it's getting done, in my personal opinion, the proper way. It's like, hey, this is coming up. We need to recognize this. Who can we include in order to execute properly and professionly? And
I'm gonna change that word. Who can we empower?
True.
You know what I'm saying?
Who can we empower?
Not to correct you, but like
No.
I think that's a very important. Like we want people who have the correct perspective on certain cultures to be empowered. Give me the power to lead this conversation, to lead this effort of inclusivity, and I will show you how we can do it the right way, the better way, the proper way. That's
and and I think it's even better. Like this is an example, but looking down the line, like Caravana is just around the corner. It's going to come around. Hopefully, it's happening this year. And now, when you're looking at representation, you have both yourself and Azalea who work on CHUM, right? And that is a large radio station, and they do large things. You know what I mean? Not to say they need to float at Caravana to be like, hey, we're CHUM FM, but there's the opportunity now to have their brand represented within that audience and build and garner attention within that audience, and it should be executed, right? The same way that we
were on the road last year.
The same way you would do it
with Carnival Nations,
St. Patrick's Day or whatever, right? Like so.
Skipping a year. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you were on the road.
I forget what year it is, what man, with COVID and whatnot, but
right, of course.
But CHUM is a major sponsor now for Toronto Caribbean Carnival, which is
yes.
Yeah.
Who's this? CHUM is?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd
Absolutely.
love
As
to
it
hear
should.
it. That's
Absolutely.
great.
And I think when we're talking about representation, it's about letting companies know that, hey, listen, there's a our community wants to be involved.
True.
People are very good when people hear Azalea talk our Trini talk on CHUM, or they hear me give a little nod to hip hop or reggae culture, whatever. The Black community says, you know what, we actually ride with this radio station, but we didn't know y'all were riding with us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so they really love that, and we use that example just so those who are in power that listen, that diversity is not it's not really like a roll of the dice. It's actually a good bet. It's a very safe bet. You'll be doing yourself a.
You know what? It is the best part to get. It's the best way to get mainstream.
Yeah.
When you think about it, you know what I mean?
For
Like
sure.
when you think about it, it's like if you were able to cross off all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
And be like, here, we want to represent the city by doing this. And Toronto is one of the most multicultural and diverse cities on the planet.
Yeah.
I often feel like for years it's been a bit of a misstep. You want people from all over the globe, and we're talking, specifically about, the Black or Caribbean or African in this particular conversation. But, when you talk about the Filipino population in the city, or you talk about the East Indian population in the city, like there's so many cultures to touch and be a part of in the city that you can't go wrong by empowering somebody from somewhere else.
And also, it's not really in a city like Toronto, it's not really being honest. Because if you're a media outlet and you're claiming to, represent the city, in this city, if you're not diverse, you're just not really honest about your level of representation. Because look at Toronto, right? Like
an amazing melting pot, of cultures. It's great.
Great. So I think we all agree that, as it pertains to Black History Month and Black Excellence, Black representation is very, very important for so many different reasons. And, to wrap up, I think we could just all give our thoughts about where we are in our particular journey as people on media platforms, and where you think the city is in terms of Black representation in the media. Azalea?
I think that we are just in beginning stages. And I say that mostly because, I can't really think of that many mainstream personalities who are doing what we're doing, kind of thing. Like, I guess I could choose a bit, but I still feel like it's a long way to go. I feel like it shouldn't be as difficult as it is to get more Black people or people of color in certain rooms. But I think that once we are, and I'll stick on the topic of empowering each other and can be the voices or be that representation. I think that, we're definitely on our way and it feels good. So I think for me personally, I would say that I do the best that I can to be any sort of representation through all of my shows. Like I'll always talk about either something to do with Toronto, that's something that's going on within the city. And then I'll also talk about something, cultural from the Caribbean standpoint, something about Trini culture. And I'll definitely always talk, especially during Black History Month, all of my shows I've been including different little Black History Month tidbits here and there. I don't know how much the rest of the station is doing it, but I'm definitely making sure that I do.
That's what's up. Leah, your thoughts on that?
I would like to say, like, 2019 and before that, I actually felt quite hopeless and helpless in terms of, Black representation in the city and just being able to like see or have our voices be heard. I would say 2020 was an actual pivot, an actual like focal point where I could say, I'm not saying that any huge changes were made, but I can see that change is starting to develop, similar to Azalea. I think it's only starting now. But I do see progression, and that's actually very positive. Just the fact that I'm in these spaces, that I can feel comfortable in that room in Virgin Morning Studio, where I can express myself as a first generation Canadian Jamaican. I can give my experiences on air. We're doing a highlight of Black profiles every single day this entire month. We're shouting out local Black businesses, and it's just being so welcomed and embraced. So just to see that, I would say there's progression, but more to Azalea's point, so much more to come, like so much more to go as well.
That's what's up. Dames.
Yeah, echoing the same sentiments. I think at the last podcast or the first podcast in the installment, I bigged up both, Leah and Azalea because they're trailblazing and they're blazing their own path as, women of color in the media business in Canada, to have the positions they have is definitely something to be proud of. And as we look forward to the future, things are looking up in my opinion, you know what I mean? Like we're talking media personalities. Jamar, you're on, a heritage station, a staple within Toronto for eons in terms of radio and FM frequency. Azalea, you're over there as well. Your personality there. Leah, she's in the morning show doing Virgin Mornings, and even when you flip and you look at, television side of things within our company with Bell, having guys like Tyrone, who's the host of the biggest entertainment show in the country. Tracy Melcher was on there, and then, even like Keisha Shante, like we're starting to see, and we always have to an extent. I mean, Master T back in the day, that kind of thing. But, I feel like for anybody growing up who wants to get into media, as we age, meaning our generation comes of age, at some point we're going to be in those positions of power. That's just the way it goes, right? So with our lens that we have on now and knowing what it's taken over the past, 15, 20 years for us to get where we are, we're going to open the floodgate for the following generation and the generation after that. So the future looks bright, in my opinion, especially here in Canadian media. I said I started, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and my approach was totally different. I really had to reel it in. Now I'm at a point where it's like, look, I'm an asset if I'm myself.
There it is. There it is, James. There it is. There it is.
Let me do
it.
There it is. That's what's up. That's what's up. And I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I'll just say, my journey in media has brought me like all over. I mean, I've been on the radio in 3 different countries, so many different cities. And, what I've consciously done as, making part of my brand, like me and all of me. So like, if you want this, you're going to get all of it. You could get my love for hip hop, soul, R&B. You're going to get my love for reggae, dancehall, soca, all them things. Like you're going to get Jamar.
And, let me just jump in, and say this, because you know what? We have to big up some of the people that let you be you. You know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely.
Sarah Cummins was your PD when you first came here. And she, and it was like, I was sitting back on the sideline. I was like, wow, because I didn't know her that long. She was a PD for CHUM FM for a little while before you came in, but she really kind of let you come in. And I remember hearing Castaban on CHUM Morning Show, like shortly after you came. You had show, the party, what was it, the house party with Jamar during, like she lets you be you. She lets you do your thing. She lets you step outside of morning show hours, which is something that isn't really done. You know what I mean? So as we're talking about some people of color making their way into those positions, we have to big up the people and the allies within the position.
James, these are conscious conversations that we all had, and I gotta big up the people I work with. And like at no point have I ever felt constrained by any forces. Right. People are like, yo, just do you. Like, what's hot? Let us know. And I'm like, we need to do this. Cass is in town. Let's bring him in. Let's do this. Let's play a little of this. Hey, a mixture. No. And it's been all love. But I think the change is because people are seeing in high places that, bringing in diversity, having this representation is not even, it's a personal win for whoever helps turn those keys, but it's also a win for the company when we do that, where we can do it the best way to affect our business. So, I would just say to anyone who's watching, who looks to be in media or is a decision maker in media, representation on this Black History Month, we need to just understand that representation does matter, and representation is a good thing. And also, if you're looking to get in media, be yourself. Better yourself, like we all have. Be yourself. And there are people working in front of the scenes and behind the scenes to open the doors so that more of us can come in. So just stay at it and be yourself, and things are happening slowly. Change happens slowly, but it's happening. All right. I think this was a great discussion today, guys. What do you think?
Yes,
great.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everybody for listening to our I think it was great. Our Black Excellence discussions. Thanks, Azalea, Hart, James Nellas. Thank you to Leah Abrams for just sharing their thoughts with me and the incredible conversation that came from it. And I'm Jamar McNeil. Stay tuned for another week of discussion just like this. Don't forget to subscribe on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcast to listen to even more.